Before we start today's video, we just want to bring you a short message from our amazing sponsor, NordPass. Personally, I love the ease of signing into everything with my Gmail account. Some of you may do something similar with your Facebook account, but have you ever thought about what would happen if that account was hacked? As you may be able to tell from the tone of my voice, I'm a pretty mellow guy, but even the thought of my Gmail being hacked makes me panic. I can't even begin to think of how many important aspects of my life would be compromised if that ever happened. So to prevent that, I started using NordPass. It's an easy to use and very secure password manager. It stores all my passwords in one place and has a great autofill feature, so logging in to any website is a breeze. It also auto-generates passwords for me, so I never have to worry about coming up with new ones. NordPass is incredibly secure, so I feel safe using it to store my credit card information, so it makes online shopping incredibly easy. You may be wondering, what makes NordPass so safe? Well, NordPass is a zero-knowledge password manager. That means no one else but you can see what's in your encrypted vault, not even the NordPass team. Every year, NordPass analyzes the top 200 most common passwords. This year, they broke it down by country. Worldwide, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is the most common password. Also, many people use their name. Here in Canada, some other common passwords are password, Canada, Superman, and perhaps least surprising, hockey. Whether you use one of those common passwords or not, you should check out NordPass to protect yourself when you're online. If you're unhappy for some reason, they offer a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you have nothing to lose. Get an exclusive NordPass deal plus one additional month for free by clicking on nordpass.com/criminallylisted or use the code criminallylisted at the checkout. Number 3. William Happ. Angela Crowley was born in December 1964 in Oregon, Illinois. In high school, she was a cheerleader and an honor student. She then attended Northern Illinois University in DeKalb County, Illinois. At some point, she decided she wanted to become a travel agent. She took a training course in Minneapolis, Minnesota. In January 1986, she landed a job in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and relocated there. On the evening of May 24, 1986, 21-year-old Angela Crowley left her apartment in Fort Lauderdale and started driving to Yankeetown, Florida. She was planning on visiting a college friend. At about 2:40 a.m., Crowley stopped at a convenience store in Crystal River, Florida, which is about 13 miles from Yankeetown. She used a payphone to call her friend to get directions. But tragically, Crowley never made it to her friend's home. About 20 hours later, fishermen found 21-year-old Angela Crowley's dead body floating in a canal. Her exercise tights were wrapped around her neck. The medical examiner determined she had been beaten, raped, and strangled to death with her pants. On the body, they found pieces of broken glass. The police tracked Crowley's last movements. In the parking lot of the store where she called her friend, they found more broken glass, which appeared to be from a car window. About 1/6 of a mile from the store, the police found Crowley's car. The driver's side window had been smashed. The police theorized that after Crowley called her friend, she got back into her car. The killer smashed the window and then dragged Crowley out of the car. He then took her to the banks of the canal where he raped her and murdered her. He then dumped the body in the canal. He then drove the car away from the crime scene. Unfortunately, the police didn't have any suspects, so the case went cold for several months. Then in August 1986, the police received a visit from some FBI agents. They were looking for a 24-year-old man named William Happ. Happ was wanted for an armed robbery and kidnapping in his hometown, Gilroy, California. Happ had robbed a gas station and kidnapped one of the employees. After the robbery, he fled the area and the FBI was tracking him down. They learned he had an aunt who lived in Crystal River. Turned out that Happ had been in Crystal River in April and May. He left town about a week after Crowley's murder. Happ's long criminal history dates back to when he was just 11 years old. He had convictions for burglary, driving while intoxicated, resisting arrest, robbery, kidnapping, and train derailment. After talking to the FBI, the police thought that Happ may have possibly killed Angela Crowley. A few weeks later, the FBI found Happ in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and they extradited him to California. In October, investigators from Florida visited Happ while he was in jail. They showed him photos of Crowley, and he claimed he didn't know her. He was adamant that he definitely did murder her. The police got Happ's fingerprints and his shoe prints. A shoe print had been found in the dirt outside the car. They also found finger and palm prints on the exterior of Crowley's car. Happ's shoe print and fingerprints matched those found on and around Crowley's car. So 6 months after Crowley's murder, Happ was charged with her murder. William Happ ended up pleading guilty to robbery and kidnapping in Gilroy. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Happ was then transferred to Citrus County, Florida in February 1987 to go to trial for Crowley's murder. There were several delays, so he didn't end up going to trial until 2 years later, in January 1987. The prosecution knew that their case was entirely circumstantial. They had Happ's fingerprints on the outside of the car and his shoe print next to the car. That just proves he touched her car, not that he killed her. The prosecution did have one valuable witness. It was an inmate who shared his cell with Happ. He said that Happ had shared details of the murder with him. But even still, jailhouse snitches are not great witnesses. Nevertheless, the trial got started, and then there was a problem. When the prosecution questioned a defense witness, he brought up Happ's criminal record, and he wasn't allowed to do this, so a mistrial was declared. Happ went to trial again in July 1989. The trial lasted 4 days. Then the jury deliberated for 5 hours. He was found guilty on all charges. He was then sentenced to death. For the next 24 years, William Happ sat on death row and maintained he was innocent. He pointed out that no physical evidence proved he killed Angela Crowley. The evidence just showed that he was outside of her car. He appealed several times, but each time he lost. On October 15, 2013, 51-year-old William Happ was brought into the death chamber at the Florida State Prison in Stark, Florida. At 6 p.m., the curtains were opened to the viewing gallery. 17 of Angela Crowley's family and friends were there to witness the execution. William Happ then shocked many people. He said, "For 27 years, the horrible murder of Angela Crowley has been clouded by circumstantial evidence and uncertainty. For the sake of her family, loved ones, and all concerned, it is my agonizing shame that I must confess to this terrible crime." He then apologized and asked for forgiveness. At 6:03, the drugs were pumped into his system. At 6:16 p.m., William Happ was pronounced dead. Number 2. Merle William Martin. Merle William Martin was born in 1909 in Joplin, Missouri. His mother, Clara Lay, was known for her wild behavior. By the time she was 38, she had been married 7 times and had been arrested at least that many times. Merle Martin first got into trouble around the age of 20 for being drunk in public. He was then caught stealing chickens, and he was sentenced to 3 years in prison. In 1934, Merle was serving 5 years on a burglary and larceny conviction at the Missouri State Penitentiary in Jefferson City. After a visit from his mother, the prison guard searched Martin's cell and found a loaded pistol. He told the prison officials that his mother had smuggled it in. His mother admitted that she did so, but the gun was never supposed to be used to hurt someone. Instead, she wanted her son to pretend like he had found it and turn the gun over to the warden to win favor with him. Clara Lay was sentenced to 5 years in prison for smuggling the gun into the prison. In the late 1930s, Martin was released from prison and settled in St. James, Missouri. There, he established a gang that robbed houses in Illinois, Kansas, and Missouri. Martin became known as the pillowcase burglar because he often collected valuables in a pillowcase. In January 1939, Martin and one of his core gang members were arrested. On February 3, 1939, the night before his trial, Martin escaped from the courthouse where he was being held. He was caught 2 months later in Kansas City when he tried to sell 50 stolen chickens to a produce market. Martin was sentenced to 8 years in prison for the burglaries. Sometime in early 1940, he was sent to the state psychiatric hospital. In June 1940, he escaped from the hospital. 6 months later, he was in Miller County, Missouri. On January 19, 1941, Martin pulled up in front of a cafe in a stolen Ford. 2 men were in front of the cafe, Carl Reed and Virgil Dozier. Both men had served time in prison with Martin. Martin told Reed to get into the car because he had something to show him. Dozier decided to go along for the ride. They drove out to a deserted home and Martin parked the car. He then pulled out a handgun and said to Reed, "I'm going to keep you from ratting on me." Reed lunged at Martin, but Martin managed to fire a few bullets. Dozier was in the back, and he tried to wrestle the gun away from Martin. He managed to pull Martin's sweater over his head, and then the gun misfired. They fought outside the car, and Martin got Dozier pinned. He then tried to strangle him. Dozier managed to bite Martin's finger, and he let go. Dozier then got up and ran away. He managed to find some help. When the police arrived at the scene, Martin was gone and Reed was dead. Martin was arrested 10 months later in Iowa while driving a stolen car. In the car were stolen items, 9 guns, and tools used for breaking and entering. He was sent to the federal prison in Leavenworth, Kansas. When Martin finished serving his sentence, he was sent back to Missouri to serve out the rest of his sentence for burglary. He was never charged with the murder of Carl Reed. On May 9, 1952, 42-year-old Merle Martin was released from prison. On June 23, 1952, Martin and his brother-in-law, Charles Isrig, were outside of Sarah, Kansas. The stolen car they were driving went into a ditch. Martin stole a tow truck to try to get it out of the ditch. Suddenly, 2 sheriff's deputies surprised them. A gunfight ensued, and 31-year-old sheriff's deputy Willard Carver was killed. Martin and Isrig ran from the scene. Martin managed to steal another car, and he fled the area. Isrig was arrested the next day in a cornfield. Martin managed to stay on the lam for several months. On August 11, 1952, he was added to the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list. On August 28, 1952, Martin broke into a home in Alabama. He assaulted the woman who lived there and her son and stole their car. The woman reported the incident, and the police were on high alert for the car. Martin was spotted driving the car, and he was run off the road near Pacific, Missouri. Martin ran from the car and into some nearby woods. He managed to hide out in the woods for 2 days. When he emerged, he came across a police car that had keys in the ignition. He stole the car and started heading for East St. Louis. But he was swarmed by police officers after a few blocks, and he gave up. Merle went to trial for first-degree murder in November 1952. He was found guilty, and he was sentenced to death. His brother-in-law, Charles Isgrave, pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison. In the lead-up to Martin's execution, Isgrave said that he was the one who fired the fatal shot, and Martin didn't kill anyone. Therefore, Martin should not be executed for Carver's murder. There was an intense campaign to get Martin off death row, but it didn't work. He was scheduled to be hanged early on the morning of July 16, 1954. Shortly after midnight on July 16th, about an hour before the execution, the warden received a letter that was handwritten by Martin. It reads, "Now that I am about to die, I wish to set the record straight before I go meet my maker. Isgrave did no shooting." These words were underlined. On June 23, 1952, I fired the shots that killed Officer Willard Carver near Zara, Kansas. We, Isgrave and I, were taken by surprise by Officer Carver and Officer Gaunt. The only words spoken by either of the officers were "hold it," and then they both started shooting. I could see no one, but I thought several people were shooting at us, and I emptied my revolver and escaped. It was not my intention to shoot anyone, and I am very sorry that it happened. The loved ones of Officer Carver have my sincerest sympathy. It was then signed, Merle William Martin. Martin's last words were, "I would like to thank all my friends who helped me, and all those who tried to help. They prayed for me. If there are any Catholics among you, I would appreciate it if they prayed for me." Martin then walked up the gallows steps. The trapdoor opened at 1:03 a.m. 44-year-old Merle William Martin was pronounced dead shortly afterward. Number 1. David Neal Cox. In the summer of 2009, the Cox family lived in Pontotoc County, Mississippi. David Neal Cox and his wife, Kim Kirk Cox, had 2 sons together. Kim had an 11-year-old daughter, Lindsay, from a previous relationship. David had worked as a commercial truck driver, but then he hurt his back, so he went on disability. At some point, he started abusing methamphetamines. One day that summer, while Kim's 11-year-old daughter, Lindsay, was at her grandparents', Lindsay decided to tell Kim something important. Over text messages, she said that David had sexually abused her several times. Kim then reported David to the police, and he was arrested. He was held in jail until April 2009, and then he was released without going to trial. When he was released, Kim got a restraining order against him. Kim, Lindsay, and her 2 sons moved into her sister's home. A few weeks later, a bullet came through the screen door of the home. Then 39-year-old David Cox burst through the door. He got his sister-in-law out of the house. He then shot his 41-year-old estranged wife in the arm and the abdomen. He then went into the living room and grabbed his 12-year-old stepdaughter. David brought her into the room where her mother was bleeding to death. He then sexually assaulted her 3 times in front of her. While this was going on, the police surrounded the house. There was a standoff over the next 8 hours. Eventually, David released all the children and surrendered. But there was nothing that could be done for 41-year-old Kim Kirk Cox. In August 2012, David pleaded guilty to capital murder, among other charges. A month later, he was sentenced to death. David never showed any remorse for what he did. In July 2018, he wrote a letter to the district attorney that read, "If I had my perfect way and will about it, I'd ever so gladly dig my dead, sarcastic wife up, whom I very happily and premeditatedly slaughtered on 5/21/2010, and with eager pleasure kill her again. A few months later, in October 2018, David relinquished his rights to all appeals, and he said he was worthy of death. A competency hearing was held, and it was determined David understood what he was requesting. In October 2021, his execution date was set for November 17, 2021. In the lead up to his execution, many people wondered if David would confess to another murder, because David Cox was the prime suspect in the disappearance of his brother's wife, 40-year-old Felicia Cox. Felicia went missing on July 2, 2007, about 2 years before David killed his wife. Felicia was last seen visiting David's wife at their home. Felicia's vehicle was later found abandoned. But 50-year-old David Neal Cox was executed on November 17, 2021, without saying if he was involved in his sister-in-law's disappearance. Then, a few weeks later, the district attorney made an announcement. Just before David was executed, he told his lawyer he had murdered Felicia Cox. He wrote specific details on where her body could be found. David's lawyer delivered the information to the district attorney 2 days after the execution because client-attorney privilege no longer applied. The police followed the instructions. It led them to a piece of land that used to be owned by Felicia's family. On December 12, 2021, they uncovered some human remains. The police got a DNA sample from Felicia's daughter and compared it to the remains. After 14 years, the remains of 40-year-old Felicia Cox were found. If David Cox revealed why he murdered his sister-in-law, that information was never made public. It's also never been made public how Felicia was murdered. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Please don't forget to check out our new channel, Paranormally Listed. There's a link on the screen now, and there's a link in the description box below this video. Well, that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.